All right, what is going on, everybody? My name is Jordan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim, and I'm joined by Wil today, one of our data scientists on the team. Wil's been working hard the past few weeks on a big update to our NFL sim that just went live for week 4 here this week. So we're super excited about this here. It's a big update. Wil's been working hard on it for a long time and wanted to just do a quick video talking through some of these changes, what the improvements were, what went into this here. So we'll go ahead and just jump right in. Wil, do you want to kind of just provide like a little summary on what we did here and what you've been working on?
Yeah, so I feel like the three main things, at least like from my perspective on it, the first one is just the speed of the sim, making it faster so that we can run more sims, have sims finish quicker, and all of that good stuff with lock. And then for like the sim itself, I really wanted to dig into both sort of like aspects that fall under like coaching decisions. Like, are they going to run the ball or pass the ball? Are they going to punt or go for it or kick a field goal? Like these kind of things that I feel like can often be pretty tricky to model, even though they're usually like, a person watching a game has a pretty clear consensus of like, okay, they should punt here. Okay, they should kick. And I think that there's some oddities that will happen when you're trying to model it, because it really isn't as straightforward from like the data perspective as it is with the human intuition and having watched football and understood all these things. So that was my main thing that I like really wanted to dig into this year to improve in our NFL model, is like making sure we get those niche outcomes correct, because they have like such a huge effect when it comes to like the actual game script. And so if you're thinking about like a showdown lineup, if you're thinking about like um, if we have them going for it when they're more likely to kick a field goal, then we're undervaluing the kicker. And in showdown, like if a kicker gets 3 field goals, like he's going to be in the optimal lineup kind of thing. So it can really be really impactful. And obviously like that expands out to main slates and larger slates, but especially with showdown and how big NFL showdown is, I really wanted to get those as dialed in as we could.
Yeah.
So that was my first main focus. And then my second one was around how we figure out how many yards a player goes on a given play. Just because that's another really tricky one where it's, we all hear the stats like, okay, Nick Chubb gets 4.5 yards per carry. But then what does that look like? How many times does he get 1 yard? How many times does he get stuffed at the line? And how many times does he break like a 90-yard touchdown run? And that's not a normal distribution whatsoever. It doesn't really match any kind of distribution because it's it's so many compounding factors, all with their own different distributions, and like it just combines into something that's basically really tough to predict. So that's another thing that I worked really hard on.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, so right off the bat, like the first thing you said, we're running faster sims, running more sims. To folks, for whom maybe that's not obvious why that's better, what is the advantage of just having more time to just run more NFL sims?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to put this out yet, because I know Matt's working hard on the more sims amount of it.
Okay.
We have some cool changes cooking up there, but especially with something like Showdown, if you think about the milli to first contest, right? And it's $10 to enter, so you only need to win 1 out of 100,000 times to be break even just on Bink equity. Because it's $10 to enter, so you only need to win that infrequently. So, not that there are a ton of lineups that only Bink that infrequently. There aren't that many possible lineups, but having more sims will stabilize like the Bink rate a lot quicker, and you'll be able to if we're only subsampling 10,000 sims, we may miss some that Bink, like they still may Bink at a rate that's positive expected value, but if they're not Binking in our subsample, then they're going to show up as negative EV. So the more sims you have, the more that stabilizes, the more reliable the EV calculations are.
And we've talked about that, Matt and I have before, like just looking at the pool where, if a player's showing up at 0.5% of your 5,000 lineup pool, there's a lot of variance there with what that actual number would be if you had a 100,000 lineup pool or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. And then obviously practical impact of, eventually we're going to get a slate here this season where we get some late news, a late scratch that sim runs faster. We're updating faster, that kind of
news. Absolutely. I mean, like it's also, it's more a thing for NBA, but especially like with NFL, like if if they had announced Joe Burrow is actually out, 5 minutes before lock, having that sim finish in time that we could run it, and everyone would be able to get another build in with that news versus not would be huge.
Awesome. So on the coaching decision stuff, I know you had mentioned like running or passing the ball or kicking a field goal or going for it. What types of things fall into that coaching decision bucket? Is it really just like play calling as a whole is kind of that?
Yeah, that's sort of how we view it. Because we're obviously like we're sort of setting it up into like almost like a flow chart sort of thing. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's 1st and 10. You can ignore a field goal attempt. You can ignore, obviously, like there's some weird scenarios, but like for the most part, like you can ignore those things. But so right in that case, we're just looking, is it going to be a pass or a rush?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that is, dependent on a lot of factors. It's dependent on the quarterback, the offense, the defense, the game situation, like all of these factors. And they're all, if you think about it in their own sense, they're all correct. Like Patrick Mahomes passes the ball more than the average quarterback. But if Patrick Mahomes is up 30, he's still going to run the ball. Like it's still going to be a
Right.
handoff. And so it's all of those factors being right in their own sense, but still figuring out how on an individual, like in a given situation, how they all combine into the proper probability
Mm-hmm.
is a very tricky problem to solve. And I'm like really proud of the way that we came up with
Yeah.
solving it.
And doing things play by play like we do, that really puts a lot of importance on that, because you're not just trying to say on average do the Chiefs throw the ball on second down. It's in this exact game situation that we have in this sim,
Exactly.
are they going to pass or run the ball or go for it
Right.
or whatever, all these different things.
Yeah. And it has a huge knock-on effect from that, because like, if you're just making uh, either like pre-solved projections or you're just projecting like the mean, you can just sort of say, okay, Patrick Mahomes is going to pass on 67% of his snaps and
Mm-hmm.
run on 33%. But yeah, you can't do that. Like we can't default that to every play that Patrick Mahomes is in the
Right.
sim. Just sample 67 and 33 and see what happens, because that's going to ignore all of the game context that you need. Um, and so getting that right just makes a huge difference in terms of accuracy.
Yeah, and getting each sequential play right over the course of the script kind of adds to your ability to have a cohesive script by the end of the game, right? Like if you're
Exactly.
getting what teams are doing in the first quarter and the second quarter right, it's more likely that you're scripting the fourth quarter of that game correctly.
Yeah. And that also, and that ties into yards a lot, because that was, you know, if we're not using the proper yards distribution, and like we have them clustering too much around like their average yards per carry or something like that, like then you're not going to get how the play changes if they do run like 45 yards and like maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
not getting a touchdown, but they you're now on the opposing territory. And if that's not happening as frequently, or if it's happening too frequently, then like what happens in real life, then you're throwing off the game script and so on and so forth. So like it's a lot of stuff that it's very difficult to model, but when you do it right, it has like a huge benefit.
And so the yards one is an interesting one. That one kind of breaks my brain a little bit trying to think about that, because I mean our sim isn't, it's a play-by-play simulation, but it's not literally like 11 on 11
Right.
little
Yeah. So it's
guys
not
running
Madden.
around in a
Correct.
computer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about like the yards that happen on a play, like how, what I guess are some of the factors that end up affecting
Yeah.
that?
So I mean, we have. I feel like they're if you're thinking about it, like they're the ones that you'd come up with. So it's like if for a running play, it's the ball carrier, so it'd be the running back most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the offense as a whole, which just like sort of gives us a bit of a prior about the offensive line, about like how good are they at scheming their running back open, like that sort of stuff. Then
Yeah.
you have the defense, which again the same thing in reverse, and then um, we also like include like the down, like if it's a 3rd and 1, they're probably getting like 1 to 2 yards for the median or modal outcome is like they're just getting that first down, because that's the goal of the play. That's the play design. But
Yeah.
1st and 10, you probably are averaging 4 to 5 yards a carry, because there's a lot more room. The defense doesn't know if you're passing. There's more space. So like those outcomes may be a lot more likely than they are on different things. So uh, we're sort of combining all of those together, and then we're coming up with a prediction. So you can think of it similarly as like when they quote a running back's yards per carry, but we can sort of say like in this situation, the average is going to be 5 yards.
Mhm.
And then we take that 5 yards and we figure out now what does that look like in terms of like for him to average 5 yards on this carry. What does that distribution of actual yards look like? Like how many times
Mhm.
is he going really far down the field? How many times is he getting stuffed at the line and all of that to make it add up to the correct mean? Where like we're confident in this prediction, like this is the correct value of the meaning, the average amount of yards that he went.
Mhm.
And how do we, because, in the sim, we don't just want to give him the average yards. We want to give him
Right.
like, we want to sample and say like, okay, on this one, he went -1 yards. And so now it's 2nd and 11 and they need to pass. So getting that right was really tricky, but I
Yeah.
think it's really cool how we did it. So
And it's very much tied to the game scripts, right? Like if a team is much further down, I presume they're going to be taking more deep shots or, trying to get the ball down a little bit down the field, or where the actual like line of scrimmage versus the first down is probably ends up
exactly.
affecting a lot of how the team is playing that
Yeah,
down.
absolutely. I mean, you definitely like it's a very tricky, and it's still like, I'm not saying that we've perfectly solved it. Like I still have a ton of ideas that I want to try and figure out because it is like, you know, if you think about it, they a running back or any player sort of has two not competing but two objectives. They have the first down and then they also have the end zone. And so
Yeah.
sometimes like you're
Interesting. Yeah.
just getting the first down, and then sometimes like if you're taking a deep shot, it doesn't matter where the first down marker is. Like they're only focused on the end zone. um and like it's a very, it feels like it should be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Like when I first started working on the NFL sim like a couple of years ago, I'm like, oh yeah, it's super easy. We'll just throw it together like this and boom. And it's like, no, this is actually like really complex, but I
And
love it.
there's spots in the game where that gets like very like a team in the red zone on the 20-yard line, 1st and 10 with 2 minutes left in the half, right? You have like
Right.
all these weird, there's only 2 minutes left. First down is 10 yards away, end zone's 20 yards away. Like thinking about how the team is attacking that situation
Exactly.
is really important.
Yeah. No,
Cool.
it's yeah, it's very like it's coming back and working on it again this year, like with this level of detail, was like really cool for me. Is it was like totally, like I'm with you. It was breaking my brain at first
Yeah.
too. Like when I was working on it, and I threw so many things at the wall. Like, oh, what if we try this? What if we try this? And we just kept iterating on that until we found something that we really like, and I'm really proud of it.
One question I have for you is how important have you found our like team tendencies or like matchup in the way that this ends up working out? Like, is it a bigger factor to say like any two NFL teams playing in this game state are likely to all kind of play the same way, or is team factors in the matchup for a given week like actually very important? Does that question make sense?
Yeah,
Or like
I
which?
think I get the question, and I think unfortunately the answer is very complex.
Okay, yeah,
It's in for most game states, it's going to be they're going to play the same.
yeah,
Like if I like every team's opening drive, like for the most part, like Kansas City's going to pass a little bit more. Baltimore's going to run a little bit more.
yeah.
But for the most part, like it's pretty close. Like their percentages aren't going to be more than like 5 to 10% in either direction on the extremes. Um, but then like if you think about like Kansas City and all the times that they run like passing plays at 1st and goal
Hmm.
kind of thing, because they have Travis Kelsey, and like they have all of these like trick plays and everything like that. Then it really does get different. Um, and so it's not something that we do perfectly, but it's something that
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we have like a pretty cool solution to, of like how we're modeling those impacts. And like one thing that I do want to get like much more granular on is like the defensive personnel on the field. And I know when Matt sees this, he's going to be upset that I'm bringing this up, because it is definitely a rabbit hole to try and dig into. But
Yeah.
I think like right now we're modeling how does the Broncos defense, in this case like Patrick Surtain versus Tyreek Hill, sort of come into effect. But
Hmm.
it's not like we're doing that in the sense of Tyreek Hill and Broncos defense, not in the sense
Right.
of is Patrick Surtain shadowing Tyreek Hill, sort of thing. And I think that would be another cool level to take it to.
Yeah, I feel like one of the conversations that I'm hearing a lot on other shows this week and this season is the like run funnel, pass funnel thing. Like certain defenses entice the offense to throw or run the ball more based on like putting certain personnel out there to make
Right.
the opponent play to their strengths. I'd be interested to see how that kind of
Yeah, that's
worked out in a
fascinating. I
sim.
would love to, because I mean, we are capturing that to some effect. Like we're looking at, how much do opposing teams run against this defense or that sort of
Right.
thing. But yeah, that's a fascinating thing to dig into.
So, I mean, you made a good point with showdowns being an awesome application for this, just because we're getting down to the single game script level, building lineups for those game scripts. The one other thing that jumps to mind that I think probably makes a big jump here is the contest sims as well,
Mm,
because it's also getting to that level of granularity where every lineup for each contest sim, we're picking out a random game script for each game on the slate and saying, when this event happens, how did the lineup
exactly.
score? As those game scripts get better, that contest sim gets better.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that that's just it's a hugely valuable thing because I mean, again, like you are like no matter how accurate or dialed in your distributions are, like the means still matter. Like the average projection that you're coming up with, like you know, if like your target share is just wrong or something like that, like those means matter. But like, you know, having those distributions correctly is like a very, I feel like understated part. Like of all the like
Mm-hmm.
contest synth talks that I've heard about, it's all they're all working on this stuff, but like getting those distributions right really makes a huge impact. Because like some of the times like the game scripts, if they're not practical, then that contest sim, like that specific one, doesn't matter. Because like if
Mm-hmm.
it's not an actual game outcome that can occur, then there's no like somebody's not going to throw 7 interceptions and 7 touchdowns, and
Right,
probably
right.
Tua might go do that this weekend and make me bite my tongue. But like
Yeah.
it's if you're just randomly sampling and you're not getting those distributions like correct, you can get some pretty weird outcomes, and that can really like getting those as close to reality as possible is the best thing you can do.
Well, the feedback loop of the play-by-play to me is just like the thing I keep coming back to. Like the
Mm,
more margin for error you allow in your distributions early in the game, the more nonsensical your script is going to be by the end of the game. And that's like the
exactly.
most uniquely football thing I can think of. Like it's hard to imagine that in baseball. Like you could be really wrong with the way that you project like the first 5 innings of a game, and you'd probably be decent at doing the seventh, eighth, and ninth inning, but it's not going to work like that in
Right.
football. Like
No, because in baseball it's all independent events, and in
exactly,
football
yeah,
it's all like it's one fluid state throughout the game, and
yeah.
that's yeah. It's tricky. It's much trickier than it is with baseball to get that going, but it's also a lot more fun, in my opinion.
So as the game scripts improve, that is something that we can tell people this is better, and you can kind of get a sense of it and maybe get better results in your lineups. But is there anything in the data that is visible to the user on the app here in the form of projections or correlations or percentiles or anything like that that you expect an
Yeah.
improvement with this on?
I feel like correlations and percentiles are the two biggest ones.
Yeah.
In general, I would say that our mean projections are probably similar. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think that like when we're obviously like testing this before deploying it, and it's like I don't think that they're more than one, maybe 1.5 points off in like different scenarios or whatever. But the correlations between like a quarterback and his wide receiver and opposing defense and all of these sort
Mm-hmm.
of things, like I think that those are definitely improved from the previous model, just because we are getting better at that game script and how that affects the other players.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just kind of poking around and messing around with this for the first time. But one thing that jumps out immediately to me is these like kind of alpha wide receivers here look quite a bit more correlated to the opposing team quarterback and also some of the opposing team skill position players. I know there was some discussion in the Discord and things like that in the first 3 weeks of the season about run backs and that positive correlation there, and that seems to have increased.
Yeah, and I think I personally think that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like I shipped this, so of course I think it's correct. But
Yeah.
like it really is like there's a sizable a noticeable difference in like you can just look at it in rush rate. Like a rush rate and it's where a team is up by 2 touchdowns and a team is down by 2 touchdowns. It's like 65% to rush if you're up and 30% to rush if you're down, and like that makes a sizable difference because if you are down and you're throwing more, throwing has a higher like expected points added per play. So like you're more likely to get that game score going, and it really is a feedback loop in that sense.
One question I had as well is, do we change? I'm trying to think about the right way to to position this here, but let's say you're like, we've got a game script where as the sim is going along, Mark Andrews, for example, is having a 95th percentile outcome through the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Does that affect the like usage of Mark Andrews in the second half of that sim?
No, so it doesn't right now.
Okay.
Well, not in the way that you're thinking, I don't think. So
Okay.
we do. This is something I talked about last year when you had me on to talk about NFL
Yeah.
model
Yeah.
updates. But the context usage, like the basically, you know, say Justin Jefferson's going to get 30% of targets, right? But what do those 30% of targets look like? Are they more first and 10 in our own territory? Are they red zone targets? Are they those like that sort of context?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is something where, like if they're up by more, they're more likely, like if they're passing, it's usually just checkdowns. Like it's to the tight end, it's to the running back. So, something like that where Mark Andrews scores 3 touchdowns in the first half, like that would probably drive down his usage in the second half of the sim.
Mm-hmm.
If they're up by some, I guess he's a tight end. So,
Yeah.
but like say it was Justin Jefferson, but like that, like we are capturing sort of how a player's usage changes based on the situation, but
Yeah.
not in the sense like, okay, they're clearly feeding Justin Jefferson, like we need to up his usage in the second half. That isn't something that we do right now.
Gotcha. So, I mean, using that, let's use Justin Jefferson as the simpler example. So, if he's just gone off in the first half, in the second half, we're thinking about, okay, what is the script of this game? Are the Vikings way ahead? Do they need to keep throwing the ball?
Right.
But not so much in maybe a closer game saying, okay, clearly the defense can't cover Justin Jefferson in the sim, so Kirk Cousins starts feeding him the ball. That doesn't
Right.
really happen in that
Correct. And so like we're hoping to capture that in like the sense of like our input usage projections, like our input target share that he's getting
Mm-hmm.
should theoretically like reflect that probability, like it's sort of reflective of like, yeah, sometimes like he's just always open and gets fed all the time. But we're sort of taking that static rate and then we're just adjusting for the context in the game around that rate, but the
Mm-hmm.
baseline isn't ever changing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. It's another situation where it feels like there are some competing factors there, where it's very easy to like try to intuit like, oh, well, Justin Jefferson's going off in the first half. Clearly, they're going to feed him the ball. But what if the game is not close, right?
Right.
That it just gets complicated of like how much does that actually affect usage on average, and what is like the distribution of a player having their 95th percentile outcome in the first half of their usage in the second half actually look like?
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean,
question.
I definitely like. I'm not saying that we have the correct approach for that. I would love to dig in. Like, that's definitely like a really cool thing to explore and look into. But yeah, so right now it's just a static percentage adjusted for the context of the game. But I do think like that would be really cool to look into, and obviously it'd be tricky, but
yeah,
fun.
So we talked about the percentiles and the correlations as kind of some measurables that probably got a little bit better here. Are there any like categories of kind of type of player or even type of script that you think we would have done a little bit better on here in terms of like maybe bringing in outliers? Or I know sometimes with these improvements it's easier to say our bottom, like our wide receiver 4s and 5s, like our low projected guys are going to get a little bit better here, or maybe our top guys, like anything like that in terms of like this area got better with the update.
I'm hesitant to say yes. My first thought that comes to mind with that is I do think that given the new yards distribution, that's going to have a more impactful impact on the high end players, on the players who are projected for a high yards per carry or yards per reception type thing. I think that we previously would have run like say somebody who has like an A dot of 15 or something like that. Like we may have had trouble getting what that distribution of their yards looks like on that reception, because like it's an 8 out of 15 against good coverage is 15 yards, and an 8 out of 15 against like he beat his man or something is 60 yards for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that we're better modeling those ranges of outcomes, and like that's predominantly for like the higher end players. But it is like it should sort of universally improve everybody. They're just the ones where I think we might have been most wrong with the previous version of the model.
Gotcha. And those are it's good to hear you say that, because those are the players that are often the ones you really want to get right? Like those are the
Yeah.
guys you're talking about playing, in 30-40% of your lineups and things like that. So
Yeah, and I do want to clarify again, like the means probably aren't different for them, but it's just what their ranges of outcomes in a given game look like, and maybe they're upper percentiles and lower percentiles type thing.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, whenever we ship a model update like this, a lot of folks typically just want like, okay, but now what? Like, what should I do? And my word of advice always to people is when we do something like this and make an improvement to the sim, it's a really good time to pull back on some of maybe the learned habits you have developed with rules or restrictions to your build, because they may be at best unnecessary and at worst potentially like negative EV with an update to the sim. Is there any like practical advice that you would give to somebody with their NFL showdown process or main slate process now following this update?
I feel like that's interesting because I hadn't really considered it, but I feel like if you're doing showdowns, this would be, I guess, more along the lines of like a metric. But if you're using sort of like lineup percentiles in your metric, I think maybe you're reevaluating that a little bit, because I think those got a meaningful improvement. Because like especially like with showdown like that, getting the percentiles of the players obviously changes, and the correlations themselves changes the percentile of the lineup pretty meaningfully.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is worth sort of revisiting and taking a look at. And I don't think it's going to be too wildly impactful, like from your metric. Like I don't think that it's going to, what was saying these are really good lineups is not going to suddenly be really bad ones. But that's probably the most impactful area that I'm thinking of.
That is a good one. I wouldn't have thought of that, but yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think to that point, Saber score as a whole would have probably just gotten a little bit better here as kind of a side effect of this, because Saber score is using those lineup percentiles as a part of that weighting metric.
Exactly.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I know you've got to run here pretty quick. Any other final thoughts? Anything else you wanted to add? Anything we didn't get to here?
I'm sorry that we did not project Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane to both score 5 touchdowns. I checked, that was not in the new model either. But yeah, no, I'm really happy with it. I worked really hard on this and collaborated with a lot of really smart people for it. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to play around with it here a little bit for week 4. Thank you for coming on and talking about this. I think the sim and model updates here are just like obviously such a huge part of the SaberSim product, but it can be a little bit hard to just post the message in Discord and say, this is updated, and you kind of can't really see it, but trust us, it is. So doing these kinds of conversations and talking through it is super helpful for people to get an idea of what's new and what's improved. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Well, for the folks watching and listening along, if you have questions for me and Will, you can always fire away in the Discord channel or emailing us, support@sabersim.com. And if you stumbled along this video here and haven't used SaberSim before and want to check out these awesome NFL sims that Will has built for us here, we have a free trial on our site, 5 days for free, sabersim.com. So come check us out. You get access for the, if you start the trial, as soon as I post the video, you get the Thursday night football game and you get the Sunday main slate as well in there. So anyway, thanks again, Will. We will be back hopefully with another video here coming out soon. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, everybody, and good luck.
Thank you.